What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another video today, and in this video we are doing the 85th installment of Retro Reviews. Today we're going to be reviewing my Gemini Jets 1 to 400 scale Midwest Airlines Boeing 717-200. This is an airline that is very much underrepresented in 1 to 400 scale, and it is Midwest Airlines. So they are quite the fascinating little carrier that existed back in the day. Midwest Airlines, having been based out of primarily Milwaukee, they had a huge presence out there way back when. They started operations in 1984 when they were known as Midwest Express, and during that time they operated a lot of DC-9s. They had some DC-9 15s and 30s, and eventually moved to MD-80s, and eventually the Sub-17s were some of the last aircraft that they had. But in addition, they also had some smaller regional aircraft, like some Dornier 328 jets. They had a couple of those in their fleet. And they also had they also had a Convair 580 apparently, but it was not used for passenger service. It was more of a corporate charter. So kind of fascinating there that they had that. And then at the end, they had gotten rid of their Sub-17s by 2009. They were replaced by the A319s, which were operated by Frontier, and then the Embraer 170s and 190s, which were operated by Republic Airways. So if you know anything about airline codes, the two-letter code for Midwest Airlines, Yankee X-Ray, that was transferred over to Republic Airways. So now they have inherited that two-letter code, which I thought was kind of fascinating. But as for Midwest's official demise, they shut down in November 2010, merging with Frontier. So Frontier did operate those Embraer 190s, which when they started service to Sioux Falls, that's what they started with before switching to the Airbus aircraft, which is all they have today now. I know Frontier, they also had like CRJs and Q400s and some Embraer 145s, I believe, operated by Chautauqua Airlines, which is kind of fascinating. So there's some nice little history there on Midwest Airlines as a whole. There's obviously a lot more to the story. I know a good friend of mine, he's a very big Midwest fan, and he'd definitely be the appropriate person for a more in-depth look at the history of this airline. But as you can already tell by that pin, I did acquire this model at Airliners 2025 in Atlanta. Bit of an interesting story with this, because originally it didn't seem probable that these releases, the May 2025 releases, were going to make it to the convention based on what I was told. But then eventually things cleared up and the releases arrived about a week or two before the convention. So it seemed like that they would make it, but then I was told, well, there's still a slim chance that they would make it. But lo and behold, Gemini Jets did great with getting the releases distributed to retailers all around the world, and several retailers had the May releases at the convention. So I picked this up from the DG Pilot table, and I'm very happy to say that I finally have a Midwest aircraft in the collection. So very excited about this release for sure. Starting off with the Gemini Jets logo, no 25th anniversary logo this time. Their slogan, image of the plane, aircraft type, and the very nice airline logo. There's the inside with the plastic cradle and the pamphlet. You can pause to read that. Always nice to have that little information written there. And then, of course, the sides of the box. Here's the right side with the logo. Item number is GJMEP 1488. So this is likely a release they had planned out a long time ago, and then they just finally released it once they had competition coming their way. There's an image of the aircraft and then the aircraft type itself. Adult collectible model warning up there, along with the barcode, and the left side, and then the back, which does have a 2025 copyright on it, and the Boeing license disclaimer for the 717. Though nothing about the airline. I'm guessing if anyone has the IP, if anyone holds the IP to Midwest, it's probably Frontier, though they may have let that expire. So I guess under some technicality, I don't know if Midwest is like a licensed thing anymore, but I'm not any expert on that, so I can't really speak in that regard. But what I can speak on is the loveliness of this model, this Midwest 717. As I've said, it's an airline that gets basically no representation in this scale. Phoenix did a Midwest 717 many, many years ago, but that has become impossible to find. So this Gemini release is very welcome for those looking to build up on their Midwest fleet and certainly grow that. But this is such a fantastic model. Super happy that I finally have a Midwest aircraft in my collection. That color is just so nice. We'll go ahead and get started with the review here as I ensure that the fuselage is in focus and everything is centered. We have the nose cone. There's the cockpit windows. No eyebrow windows on this. Some later 717s did not have them. A fleet code on the nose gear door along with the nose gear itself. The wheel does not roll. It's just a... Well, I think it is supposed to roll, but because the way that the axle is put together, there's no room for it to roll, so it's just kind of stuck in place. There's the L1 door and some little detail just behind that. Must have been like a sticker of some kind, what you would see when you boarded the plane. One antenna up on the top. There's the Midwest Airlines titles. They had like a signature and saver seat thing, which if I pull back up the Wikipedia page, they did list just the different cabins and all that. So there's like a signature seat and then also a saver seat. So the signature, I would assume that is the kind of like their first class that they had, and then the saver is just the standard coach or economy seats that they had. So in this case for the Midwest 717s, they had, well, initially they started out with 88 seats in the signature cabin, and then 99 seats when they were about half and half, a little more in the saver seats, and then about 40 signature seats. So 99 total there, with 59 saver and 40 signature seats. So at least that's how I'm interpreting it in that regard. And the signature seats, they were arranged 2 by 2, and then saver seats 2 by 3. So yeah, so signature first class essentially, and then saver coach economy is how it's all laid out. But yeah, and this is such a nice livery. I can see why people love this airline so much. And obviously the chocolate chip cookies, I forgot to mention those. That was another big part of Midwest's operations. You could get those in flight. There's the overwing exit doors right there. Little Boeing 717 titles underneath the cheat line there, kind of. And then there's the very lovely engines. November 9020 Mike Echo is the registration. A bit of an interesting history with it, which we'll take a look at later. And there's the Midwest tail, a nice little M there in that gold, and then the blue stripes. I'm not sure what the official name of that is, if there is a name for that logo, but it's very fascinating either way. Right side of the aircraft, we've got a smaller R1 door there, luggage door, and another one underneath the engines, and the tail on that side as well. And then taking a look at the underneath, there's the very tiny Gemini Jets logo. It continues to get smaller with every release. They still want to have their branding on there in some capacity, but obviously just making it smaller so that it's not as obvious when you're looking at it, but it is very tiny. Yeah, so it definitely line up a Sub 17 from 15 years ago and compare it with this one, and you'll definitely see the difference, as my Hawaiian 717 from 2011 has a pretty large Gemini logo. There's a stand hole under there, and then there's the fake pylons that I mentioned in last week's retro review, still present on the Sub 17. And then the top of the aircraft, you do have the overwing exits, along with all the nice details embedded on the wings and also the horizontal stabilizers. Very detailed model from Gemini Jets, and one of their high points that they continue to emphasize. Despite not having the best hard product across the board, they still make some excellent models. And that's what I care about more, is just the release choices as opposed to, actual quality. But there are certainly a lot of ways to go about it in this hobby. But now let's take a look at the real-life aircraft's history. She first flew on November 19th of 2004 and was delivered to Midwest in December. Flew with them for about 5 years before being stored in 2009, which is when Midwest got rid of the 717s in favor of the Airbuses and the Embraers. She was in storage for a little while, and eventually her next operator became Click Mexicana, starting in January of 2010, though this was very brief as the airline shut down in August of that same year. So she was put into storage for a couple years and eventually went overseas to Volaty in March of 2013, one of the only airlines outside of the U.S. that has operated the 717. She was re-registered to Echo India-Foxtrot Bravo Kilo and stored 3 years later. Wasn't long before she was back in the skies, now flying for Hawaiian, starting February 2017 and re-registered to November 4904 Hotel Alpha and given an aircraft name that I will not try to pronounce because I don't want to butcher it, but it is on your screen. And during her time with Hawaiian, she did have an incident. The aircraft moved after the tug was detached. This was when the aircraft had pushed back from the gate and was about ready to taxi for departure. It hit the tug and caused minor damage, and the driver of that tug suffered minor injuries but did make a full recovery, which is great to hear. Aircraft was repaired, returned to service, and she is still with Hawaiian. So as I check flight radar, as I typically do with aircraft that are still active, I always like to see what they're up to. Currently not flying as I record this video, but her last flight was between Honolulu, or will be between Honolulu and Kona. So looks like she's got a couple flights just between there and like Lihue, for instance, Kahului. So obviously Hawaiian has the big inter-island operations with the 717, so that's where they will predominantly fly out of. So it is nice to have those operations out there. And hopefully I do get to go to Hawaii one day just so I can see those. And of course, other fun stuff like that, the ANA A380s, the big turtles that fly in from Tokyo Narita. Very cool operation out there, and just the general Hawaiian aviation landscape. It's so fascinating out there. So hopefully I get a chance to go out there one day. And that'll do it for this episode of Retro Reviews. With that being said, thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.